Started. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Classroom 2.0 Live. And I'm sure already you can hear the lawnmower going. I'm just going to shut the window. What a great start. My name is Lorna Costantini, and I'm so happy to see you all here. I'm joined today with two great show hosts, Kim Case and Peggy George. And I know Peggy wanted to say hello and have something to say. So go ahead, Peggy.
Good morning, everyone. I just wanted to say a quick hello because I've been away for 2 weeks on vacation, and I have so missed all of you on our Saturday sessions, but it's great to be back. I spent about 2 weeks in Montana, Wyoming, Glacier Park, Yellowstone Park, and the Grand Tetons, and it was fabulous. But I had no internet connection in the mountains. So it is wonderful to see all of you and looking forward to a great show today with Alvin. So welcome, everyone.
Thanks, Peggy. You were really, really missed, and it's so good to have you back. Peggy's just one of the fastest typists. I think some of you noticed we all answered your question together, so we're going to let Kim and Peggy do a lot of that answering because I'm a dyslexic typist. But thank you for being here. And as Peggy just said, we're going to have our special guest, Alvin Trusty, and we're going to be talking about PowerPoint and how it's used in Web 2.0 tools. Each week at this time in our show, we gather to discuss technology tools and issues, and our broadcast consists of about an hour session that's recorded. And today, Alvin has agreed to stay on the show after the show if we do go over time, but we will end this show and start a review or further discussion later. You'll find a link to the full video, the audio recording, and the chat log posted in our Classroom 2.0 live site at liveclassroom20.com. Later on today, if all goes well, Kim and Peggy will have it posted for you. The topic each week for our show is posted on the Classroom 2 site itself so that you can be prepared with links and ideas and tools that you would like to share, and be ready for the newbie question of the week that's pre-announced so you can bring possible answers or solutions to share. Before we get started, I would like to review some of the features so that some of you who are new and some of you who are veterans may help us work through Illuminate. During today's session, we're going to be having some poll questions, and Kim's going to help us with that. And to cast your vote, you can use the emoticons here, the X's and the check marks located in a new section right now. That's the only place you need to check on to register your vote. You'll have a whiteboard here, but until we give you permission with the laser tool, we'll be the only ones working on the whiteboard. Next to the check mark and the X mark for voting, we have emoticons here. You can clap or express your pleasure with a smiley face. And if you do have a question, you can click on the hand button to let us know that whether you're wanting access to the microphone or you just want to ask a question. For most of the show, Alvin's going to be talking and taking over the microphone. We do suggest that you put your questions in the chat room. Hopefully there'll be time near the end and we will give you access to the microphone to come on live and ask us questions. If you do step away and you want to let us know, there is an away door, so just click on that and we'll show that you're not with us at the moment. Below these symbols is the chat window, and I want to point something out to you that all the chat discussions are visible by the moderator, so keep that in mind when you do send your chat messages. You can send them to different people in the session. To send a message, you type in your chat window there and click send. If you want to send it to someone else in the chat room, there's a drop-down menu, and you can choose the name or the moderators and click on that and send the message. For the whole room, though, make sure that your link is highlighted at this room. For those of you who will take care of the microphone down at the bottom of your screen, you're going to find the microphone button. Click on it to speak, and when you're finished speaking, please check it off so that we'll have less problems with feedback. We sometimes do have that problem when the microphones are all activated, so please try and uncheck when you've gotten to the finished talking. If you do want to resize or get a different view for your whiteboard, in the top left-hand corner, you're going to find View, and you click on that menu, and you can see that the default layout is as it appears right now. If you want to just see the whiteboard, click on here, or you can change with a wide layout. We are privileged to have Tammy Moore with us, who not only has done a great presentation on using clip art, but she helps us every week with closed captioning. So if you need closed captioning function, click on this icon at the top of your screen. Thank you, Tammy, and we really appreciate all the efforts that you put towards the closed captioning. In a moment, we're going to be using the laser tool, and here's your toolbar menu that's located at the left-hand side of your screen. Here we have the laser button, and when I give you access to the laser tool, you'll be telling us where you are in the world map. So you have access, and we're going to switch to the map. So if you could all take a moment and click on the laser button right here and show us where you are located in the world. Look at that. What a terrific representation. People from Argentina, Spain, looks like Great Britain, a lot of people from the United States. We have someone in Mexico. Thank you very much, all of you, for attending. It's great to see such a representation across the world. Yes, we have a star. Thank you very much. Look at that. It's awesome. Isn't that great? I would like to turn over the microphone to Kim so that she could take care of the poll questions. Thanks, Kim, for joining us, and I'm giving you the mic, so thank you.
Absolutely, and thank you, and welcome back, Lorna and Peggy. It's so great to have you joining us today, and we're going to be answering some poll questions today at the beginning of the show and at the end. And if you're new to the new Illuminate setup, the poll questions, the features are now located next to the blue door, and we'll be using the check and the X, and at the end of the show we'll be using the ABC. And the first poll question is, do you use PowerPoint to teach your students, either face-to-face or online? If you do, please click the green check next to the blue door, and if you do not use PowerPoint with your students, click the red X. I'll give everybody a few seconds to click on and cast their vote, and then I'll post the results. Since we're focusing on creating some PowerPoints without breaking the law today, our poll questions are going to feature that. And it looks like about 8% do not use PowerPoint with students, and about 70% do. I know I did, and after reviewing some of the Share Tabs resources, I learned some great ways I can make them much better. And hopefully you will too. So let's go on to poll question number 2. Do you ever assign students to create PowerPoint projects for class projects? If you do, please click the green check. If not, click the red X. And yes, that would apply to Keynote or OpenOffice or any type of slide share, any of those kinds of things with slide share or a slide presentation, and Google Docs, anything of that kind of nature. And let me go ahead and get those results. And it looks like 19% have not assigned students a project, and about 56% in the group have assigned student projects using PowerPoint or a similar software. Let me clear the results. Let's go on to poll question number 3. Have you ever integrated teaching about copyright along with PowerPoint projects or a type of slideshow presentation software? Copyright's a big issue with students. If you have, when they're copying images and music to accompany their slideshare or slideshow. So if you have integrated teaching about copyright, please click the green check. If not, click the red X. I'm going to go ahead and get the results. And it looks like, so far, about 48% have not, and about 27% have integrated teaching copyright. I know I didn't do a very thorough job when I was teaching students to use PowerPoint and the copyright issue. But I know better now. And now we're going to do another interactive poll. On the next slide, you're going to be using the text tool, and it's best to use the one with the A with the little lines next to it. And we'd like you to click on that tool in just a moment, and then you're going to drag out your text box and share ways that you've used PowerPoint as an instructional tool in your classroom. So if everybody could please click on that tool now, and then draw out your box and type ways that you have used PowerPoint as an instructional tool in your classroom. I know this is a little messy, and we'll move the boxes around in just a bit. So that we can kind of see these things. I'm seeing review concepts, Jeopardy games, Creative Commons, to embed movies, studying, help transfer learning, library lessons, presentations for teachers and professional and staff development, a lot for vocabulary. And clip art for young students, social media concepts. So these are some great ideas, and there's so many. We could go on for days and days about the different ways that we can use slideshows and slide shares, about illustrating concepts and vocabulary and so forth. And this will be saved in our presentation. So now I'm going to go ahead and pass the mic back to Lorna. Thank you for your participation. And it's so great to have everybody joining us today, and welcome back, Lorna and Peggy.
Thanks very much, Kim, for doing such a great job on the poll questions. We've been flipping jobs back and forth today, and I really understand what a smooth job that Kim does when she introduces the show. And that was a great indication of what our audience is like today with the poll questions. So it seems like a lot of people are really familiar with PowerPoint, so I really don't need to get into too much of the newbie question, other than I saw a couple comments about Keynote and whether it means the same thing. You know, PowerPoint belongs to the Windows environment with Microsoft, or let's just put it Microsoft. But Keynote is included in iWork, and yes, you can convert it to PowerPoint, but whatever we're talking about today applies to Keynote as well. I would like to move on to our special guest today, and that's Alvin Trusty. I had a chance to talk for a few minutes yesterday with Calvin, and I'm so impressed, I think with you, Whibley, as well, that he started out as a chemist. And so sometimes, how do we do that transfer to PowerPoint presentations? But what happened is Alvin began teaching in high school and then working with people in postgraduate work. He saw a really good interest in using educational technology, and he very gently slid to that particular expertise area. Currently, he teaches at the University of Findlay in Ohio, and he just finished off his teaching with grad students, working about technology integration, and I know he's anxious to start his summer vacation. So we thank you very much, Alvin, for holding off on that vacation and joining us this morning. But could you, Alvin, introduce yourself and maybe fill in some of the gaps that I didn't present at the moment? Welcome, Alvin.
I was just setting up so I could share my presentation with all you guys. If you could just tell me if you could see that by giving me a little smiley face. All right. I saw some people from Arizona. I actually went to graduate school in Tucson at the University of Arizona, and that's when I decided I really didn't like chemistry as much as I liked technology. And I decided to go into educational technology because I was working with teachers at the time. And since then, I've just picked up every little bit of technology that I can along the way, and now it's a full-time job for me at the university. It's nice. I have a presentation for you. A lot of this presentation, I think, was embedded in your show notes. So if you watched it, you're going to see a lot of repeats. You'll see some new things too. But if most of you are like me, when you see the show notes, you think, oh, that looks great, but you don't watch the whole thing. So bear with me if you're seeing some repeat. I think it's the kind of thing you pick something up the second time around anyways. But I have put together a presentation, and I called this one How to Create a Great PowerPoint Without Breaking the Law Take 2.0 because it was a follow-up to a presentation I gave a year earlier at the State Technology Conference in Ohio. Ohio has the third largest EdTech conference. NEC is the largest. FETC in Florida is the second largest, and Ohio is the third largest. We usually have about 8,000 people there. I figured out a long time ago it's strictly limited by the number of substitute teachers in Ohio. There are about 8,000 subs, and so we get about that many teachers because it's in February, so they have to have subs so that they can come speak at the conference. So before I start, I do have some links for you. If you could quickly jot down all of the links. And it amazes me that people do things like I just did, go through a bunch of links expecting you to write them down. I have tagged all of the links that I'm going to talk about in my Delicious account. I tagged them with Great PPT. So if you go out to that site, you can grab that. It'll be in the show notes. I was actually at a conference and someone popped up this little URL and said, okay, here's where I got this device. And I see people writing things down, and I thought, this is just crazy. So I learned a long time ago to tag everything in Delicious. And a lot of what I'm going to talk about is the result of seeing some really bad presentations. So I'll stop whenever I get to something and say why I did this or why I did that. Also, if I do something and you're like, that's not possible with PowerPoint, all of this is PowerPoint. There's no Photoshop magic or anything. I used pretty standard tools to do everything, and I'll show you as many of them as I can. I'm also on Twitter and Facebook. You can also email me. And if you want to see some of my stuff, just go to Google and type my name followed by PowerPoint, and it'll show you a lot of information that I've created. Now I'm going to talk about copyright, and I want to warn you that I'm not a lawyer. I teach educational technology at the University of Findlay, but I do want to talk about copyright law. So that's going to be the without breaking the law part of the talk. Now, before I continue, I just went through about 15 slides real quick. Is the quality coming through okay to everyone? Could you see each one of the slides? Were they choppy? Getting a lot of smiley faces. So, okay. When it comes to copyright law, usually you think of this copyright symbol, but let me first explain why it's called copyright, because it deals with copying. And when I say copy, I mean taking one thing and turning it into two things. So I could photocopy something, or I could right-click, save a copy. So any of those things are copying. And copyright can be found in the United States at copyright.gov. That's where the whole law is explained. There are thousands of pages. I'm going to touch on some of the highlights. Now, since Lorna's in Canada, I had to look up where you can find Canadian copyright, and here's the URL for that. I added that to my delicious links. Now, before we start, I would like to take a little poll. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you some scenarios, and if you think what I'm showing you is legal, I want you to click on the little check that says, yes, that is legal, or if you don't think it's legal, I want you to check on the little X that says, no, that's illegal. So here are some scenarios that I've come across while teaching. Now let's say I'm a teacher and I have a book that has a very good illustration, but I only have one copy. Is it legal for me to hold that book up in front of my class so that my students can all see a picture where they don't have a copy of the book? So is that legal to hold a book up? So it looks like just about everyone thinks that that is legal. Well, how about this? The people in the back of the room, I see a comment, is this USA law? I really only know USA law, so I will be talking about USA law. And if a lot of this goes to some resolutions in the United Nations about intellectual property right laws, so a lot of it carries over, I think. But I've only studied U.S. law. All right, the second scenario is students in the back of the room can't see the picture in the book clearly. So I take the book and I drop it onto an Elmo. An Elmo is like a digital camera that projects whatever is under it, like an overhead projector. Is it legal to digitally project an image onto the screen from something like an Elmo? And a few people don't think that's legal. Most people, it looks like, say, yeah, that's legal. Okay, there are two students that are absent. So I take my book, put it on a scanner, and I make a copy of the page that I showed the class. Is it legal for me to take that scanned page and put it into Blackboard, the tool that we use to teach, so that the absent students can see the same thing that we saw in class? So now most people think that is illegal. All right. I'll go over the answers later. All right. And this book that I have actually says on it not for resale, but I've already used that one good picture out of it, so I'm going to sell this book, even though it says not. Is it legal for me to sell a book that says not for resale on it? So most people say that's not legal. All right. I'm talking in one of my classes about polar bears, so I find this picture on the internet, and it doesn't have a copyright sign on it. Now, I don't mean, like a sign that says copyright. I mean, on this picture, there's nothing that says that this is copyrighted by a person. So is it legal for me just to copy that off the internet and use it in my presentation? I think we have probably more no's, but that one seems a little more fuzzy. Now, here's one. This is my work. One of my kids needed to learn the Times facts. So I typed meticulously into a word processor all of the math facts. for multiplication. And since it took me so much time, I put a little copyright at the bottom. Is it legal for me to copyright a document that I have created? Can I copyright that work of mine? A lot of people saying yes on that one. I see some people saying depends, and we'll talk about the depends a little bit later. Finally, I'm using the cover of a magazine in a presentation in class. So on the slide, I just put, this is copyrighted by Time Magazine. Am I covered? Can I use that legally in my presentation as long as I cite who the copyright belongs to? So most people say, yeah, perfectly legal. Okay, last one. A free day, and we want to watch a movie in class. Can I just show a movie in class? Is that legal? Most people say no. Yeah, but we do it all the time. It's funny what teachers do. Now, let me talk a little bit about presenting. So far, I've shown you, we've gone through the first 50 slides or so, and I haven't shown you anything that looks like this. This is a typical, I have a question, I want you to see the question, so I type it in, or I switch to a more interesting, ocean kind of background, or if I want to, this one was my favorite when it came to using templates. But since we're teachers, a lot of us are going to use this template because it's got the crayons on it, so it implies this is something educational. But the truth of the matter is, unless you're selling crayons, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to have something on your slide about crayons. Besides, you throw away a huge amount of your screen real estate with items that probably have nothing to do with the content on the screen. So I am not a fan of themes at all. On top of that, when it comes time to tell you what to do, I don't usually have the Illuminate to vote, so I ask people to raise their hands. I have things flying in and all sorts of things. So again, I'm not going to have animations just to distract people like that. We have a couple people with questions.
No, I think they're just doing what you said. Did you raise your hand if you think it's legal?
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Now, notice that this question has a bullet point in front of it. And I don't know why. And it's simply because that's the way PowerPoint is. So in addition to the general tag I have for this presentation, I created another one called Get Rid of Bullet. So if you want to know how to get rid of a bullet in PowerPoint, just go to that tag, and there's a document that tells you step by step how to get rid of bullet points on your PowerPoint presentation. And from now on, I'll just put something at the bottom that says tag, something like get rid of bullet. Because guns don't kill people, right? Bullets kill people. Now, hopefully you could hear that. It played through my speakers on my computer. And if you listen closely, you only, I think, heard 3 bullet sounds, even though I had 4 in there. And that's because sound in PowerPoint is highly unreliable. So I don't use a lot of sound in my PowerPoints simply because of that. Another thing in this background always reminds me of this. A background can really kill the concept that you want to talk about. For instance, I was in a classroom and I saw a teacher explaining to elementary students the shape of coins. These obviously are circles, but these are pictures, and pictures are square. So you say, well, I would never show pictures like that. The problem was the teacher was using this background, so she was explaining these circle pictures, but they were squares because of the background, where if a background that was white was used, obviously those, once again, are circles. So if you're going to use a picture, don't put it down in the corner away from your content. Make it a part of your content. Otherwise, you shouldn't use a picture. And under no circumstances should you ever read your slides word for word from the presentation screen. Your audience will figure out that you're reading the slides. They can read faster than you can talk, and this will create a disconnect between you and your audience. Now, I won't say any more about reading your slides, but that is a quote from Guy Kawasaki, and research has shown if you have words, you're better to let the audience read them without you talking, because they'll actually remember more that way. So, in review, no themes, no bullets, never ever read your slides. And let me talk about visual design for a second. There's an excellent book by Robin Williams. This Robin Williams is a female. It's not the comedian Robin Williams. That goes through 4 concepts that I find critical in PowerPoint. And you can remember them if you just remember the acronym. But let me talk a little bit about each one of them. The first one is contrast. I used this picture when I talked about bullets because it had a black background already. In white words on a black background, very good contrast. I could have used this picture with more guns, but it lacked the contrast that I needed. So I could have put up a little black stripe across, but then I thought that took away from the picture of the guns. I could have also made the guns wider, but then I didn't think you could see them as well, so I stuck with this picture that I had. Now, there was a problem with this picture, and that's it had a bullet casing flying off, and I thought that distracted from what I wanted people to see. So I just drew a black box over it. You can see my delicious tag is insert rectangle, and without the little white border, you can't tell that I did anything. So I didn't have to use Photoshop or anything. I just drew a box over it. I do this all the time. This is a black box that I wrote on. I have a picture that shows my coffee roasting. Unfortunately, you can see when I took this in my garage, things on the shelf, so I just drew a rectangle over it, and you can't tell that I did that. So the next thing is repetition. That's when you show someone pictures over and over, like a bullet coming out of a gun, and people remember it, just like you have your students do their math facts over and over and over. Repetition helps. Another thing is alignment. This is where I have multiple slides with pictures that are aligned perfectly from slide to slide. If I had pictures that jumped a little, each time I went to the next slide, that little jump would distract you. So I've aligned them all from slide to slide, so it just looks like parts of the page just disappear. If I had done this with my little math facts thing, it would have looked quite a bit different. Proximity is how close things are together. So when I put 2 pictures close together, you know that I was copying one to the other. You know that those 2 pictures go together. So those are the 4 principles that are talked about over and over in Robin Williams' book. Another thing she talks about are fonts. There are 3 basic kinds of fonts. Sans serif should be the one most commonly used in presentations, and decorative fonts should never, ever be used. Actually, they should just never be used, period, especially in PowerPoint. Serif fonts have the little boots on the end of each one of the letters, and they're great for books because the little boots help your eyes track along long lines of text. And like I said, sans serif is the best one for presentations. If you've ever watched one of Steve Jobs' keynotes, he always uses sans serif. It's also great for bulletin boards. You don't need more than 2 fonts. And here's a rule of thumb. Measure how wide your screen is diagonally in inches, and then walk that many feet back from your screen and see if you can see the font. So that's right out of Nancy Duarte's book called Slidology. She's famous for having created Al Gore's Inconvenient Truth presentation. So if you want to see an incredible presentation, watch this video and don't pay so much attention to the message as you do how it's presented. And it's an incredible presentation. And the last thing here is just something about Comic Sans. As teachers, we use things like this crayon theme, and notice it's Comic Sans. This is a decorative font, and you should never ever use a decorative font, period. So you shouldn't use Comic Sans. Check out this website. It's quite comical, talking about trying to ban it from the whole world. Another thing is capitalization. Use proper capitalization because your eye uses the tops of letters so that you can read words without seeing the bottoms. Now you looking at this probably very quickly realized that that said United States of America. Take a look at this one. Now you could probably read that, but it probably took longer because your eye uses the top of the letters, which is why you should use proper capitalization. The worst thing you could do is to have capitalization that looks like this, which I see students do all the time, and reading this kind of text is much, much slower. Now, you have to be kind of careful. You don't want anyone, jumping to conclusions, because that is not what this says. So the top of those letters are very important to the way your brain perceives what's written on the page. Now, another thing is color. Take a second and tell me what's wrong with this picture. Well, it's pretty simple. It was so foggy you couldn't see the bridge. So I had to draw the bridge on with a paint program. I did it in like 30 seconds. It looks really bad, but I got the color right. And because of that, people don't notice that that there's anything wrong with it. They're looking, the color looks okay. So when you use colors on your slides, there's lots of combinations that work really well. You can take one color and use a monochromatic scheme. You can take colors next to each other and use what's called an analogous theme, or across the way you can do complementary colors, like the one you see at Christmas time all the time. Now, for contrast, the best is a combination of black and white, either white letters or black letters. The black background is great, especially if you have a darker room. If you have a dark room and you have a white background, you have to be careful because it can really change the amount of light in the whole room. So here's an analogous one. You can see I have darker colors, darker shades of the same blue and lighter shades. This is an analogous one where I don't have different shades. But if I change those shades, it becomes very readable. This one is complementary. I have orange and blue. Once again, if I change the values, go with darker and lighter shades, it becomes very, very useful. Now this one, you see this one a lot a certain time of the year. It happens to be the color combination that colorblind people can't see. But at Christmas time, we use this one because these are the colors of Christmas. Just be aware, if you're looking at this, it probably looks very fuzzy, and it's because they're complementary colors of the same value. Now my little clip art guy takes me to a new thing, and that is clip art in PowerPoint. If you have these two little guys in one of your PowerPoint presentations, they should have dialogue, because they add absolutely nothing as far as graphics to your presentation. Now if you want to put pictures into your PowerPoint, it turns out that PowerPoint has tons of actual photographs that are built right into the clip art library in PowerPoint. Every one of these pictures showed up when I searched for teacher in PowerPoint using the clip art library specified I said I want photographs. Now the drawback is I don't know, maybe there are 10 pictures of teachers. So if you go to a conference where people are talking about teachers, you'll see those same pictures over and over. So for that reason, I take a lot of my own pictures whenever I work in PowerPoint, and I never ever add clip art just for the sake of adding one of these little cheesy clip art things. It just doesn't help your PowerPoint. Now, all of those things that I just talked about, color, fonts, just visual literacy in general, is a lot of details gone into in this book by Lionel Burmark. This is a book that I picked up this summer and read on one of my trips. It's an excellent book, and it's from an educator's perspective. So all of the content has references to research that's been done in each one of these areas. Now, I also limit all of my transitions to just one transition. I use the fade smoothly transition. I don't do the roll in, flip in, spin in, all of those things, because those only distract from the content, which is something you don't want to do. So this is actually one slide, and this is another slide with the fade transition in between of them. You can do some cool things with this. This is my disappearing act. So what I did, I took a picture of myself, and then I got up and took a picture of my empty chair, and then between them, I used the fade smoothly transition. I did the same thing on my little bridge picture. I use this all the time. Also, especially at a conference, don't count on the internet working. One of my YouTube videos is I can do the Rubik's Cube behind my back. If you go to YouTube and you search for Rubik's Cube behind the back, you'll see this presentation. But if I were to try to do this at a conference and show that little video, it might not work, because there might be a guy up front who's live streaming, and you got people doing the Twitter. At the back, you got the live bloggers, and then likely everyone in the place is checking email. So when I try to connect to the internet as a presenter, it might not work because of all of this traffic created just by the audience. And with the back channel, especially now at conferences, it's not unusual to have this problem. So I can go out ahead of time, and I can do screen captures and effectively show you my video, except I did all of those with screen captures. I use a free program called View, and I just hit Control 11, I think, on my keyboard, and it takes a picture of whatever's on the screen. And then I can incorporate those into my presentation and not have to leave PowerPoint whenever I'm talking about something that's online. So let me go over some copyright law for you. This is the U.S. copyright. You can find all of the detail in Title 17. And here are the things that you control if you own a copyright. You can reproduce something, do derivative works, distribute copies, perform it publicly, display it publicly, and transmit it digitally. So these are your rights if you're the holder of a copyright. So if you've created something, you have the copyright of that, you control all of these things. So let me go through them and relate them back to what we've already talked about. So copying is pretty simple. I talked about that early on. That's when I turn 1 into 2. And if I don't make a copy of something, if I hold up a book in front of my class, I'm not making a copy. Copyright law doesn't even apply. The same goes with the transmission. Because I'm not making a copy when I use an Elmo, it just projects onto a screen, a live image. Again, I'm not making a copy, so this is another one of those things that is perfectly legal. The next thing is derivative works. Now, a derivative work means if I write a book, I own the rights to any form that may take on, including something like a movie. So if someone wants to make a movie of my book, they have to get permission from me, the copyright holder of the book. So if I take a photo and someone wants to make a poster, that again is a derivative work. The owner of the original photo has the rights to anything that's made from the photo. This particular instance is kind of comical. The photo was taken by Manny Garcia, and then the poster was created by Shepard Fairey. Now, normally, when you want to make a poster of somebody's work, you go to the photographer and you ask permission. But Shepard Fairey didn't do it that way. He just went to Google, searched for Obama, found all these images of Obama, and he picked the one he thought looked best, and he turned that into a poster, never asking for permission. And clearly he's made a derivative work. So he was lucky because the guy that took the photo, he said, hey, if you send me a signed poster, we'll call it even. Now, since this happened earlier this year, it's taken on a whole kind of world of its own. And I think Manny most recently, first off, the people that hired him said they owned the copyright, and then he said he owned the copyright, and then he said just in the last month or so that a signed poster wouldn't cut it. He was going to need some money. So I think he got greedy. The next thing is distribution. And this applies to what's called the first sale doctrine. Whoever owns the copyright controls the distribution as far as the first sale. So if I have someone give me a book, once that book is owned by me, that's a single copy of the book, I can do anything with that book that I want. Even if it says not for sale, not for resale, I can sell that book and there's nothing anyone can do about it because the copyright holder controls the first sale. That's how libraries and secondhand bookstores survive. Because once they buy a book at the library, they can loan it if they want because they bought it. The fourth thing here is public performance. That means unless you have a copy that's licensed for public performance, you are not permitted to show it in a public performance. So you couldn't show a movie on a free day at school. Now, going back to my picture of my not-for-resale book, you can never believe So I have a little video there that I captured right off of television. It says the NFL completely owns this and that I'm not allowed to give a description or an account of the game without the NFL's consent. That means on Monday morning, I cannot talk about Sunday's game unless I have their consent, which is false, completely false. Just like printing not for resale on a book is completely false. But people believe what they read or they believe what they see on TV, so they typically don't resell a book or they don't make a copy of something on TV because they've said that it's illegal. But it turns out writing it on a television commercial doesn't change the law. So this video you can actually get right off of YouTube, and a professor that teaches copyright copied the commercial and put it on YouTube to have a discussion about fair use with her students because she said, this isn't right. So she put the whole thing out online. They fought her. She won. It's still online. You can find it online. So let me talk a little bit about how you copyright something. If you write down an idea or record it or store it on some kind of media, it's fixed. And fixed means that it's protected by copyright. So this copyright sign actually means very little. This photograph, which I actually took this photograph, is copyrighted without the little copyright sign. And if someone wanted to use that, they would need my written permission to use that picture, and this is an example form that someone could use to get written permission. Also, the picture the picture of the magazine with my little attribution to Time Magazine. This is where teachers confuse two different items. What I've given is attribution. I've given a citation so that I'm showing that I didn't create that work. That means I can't be held liable for plagiarism. And plagiarism is an academic term. where copyright is a legal term and violation of copyright can get you thrown in jail. Plagiarism, I might get an F on a paper, or I might fail a class. I might even get kicked out of school, but I won't end up in jail if I plagiarize something. So let's look at the cost of violating. This one's actually true. It says a maximum penalty of $250,000 if I violate copyright law. Now, let me show you. I did this little trick a little bit ago. I took this picture, showed you one little teeny part of it. This is a real simple technique to draw attention to one small part of a busy picture. What I did is I took this picture and I cropped everything except the one part of the picture that I wanted you to see. And I used the crop tool built right in to PowerPoint. And once I was finished, I had my original, I had my cropped version, I went back to my original and I made it darker. Again, this is built into PowerPoint. I right-clicked it, formatted the picture, and turned the brightness down. So I end up with this dark version of the picture. So I have a dark copy, I have my cropped copy. I just moved the dark copy right underneath the light copy to make it look like I have a highlighted part of the picture. So I have my original, and then I have my darker version. It makes you look at that one part of this busy slide to see what's important that I'm talking about. So I did the same thing with this slide. You've seen me do this over and over. Here's an example of some peer-to-peer sharing. If I download a picture, if I download anything on the internet that's copyrighted, I face a fine of up to $150,000 per file. Now, for comparison, if I go to Walmart and I steal a CD, in Ohio it's a maximum of a $1,000 fine. But if I were to download those 10 songs, I face charges up to $1.5 million. That's crazy. Now look at this comparison. This little teeny blip on the left is if I steal it, but if I download it, in comparison, if I had something that was 12 inches tall next to the Empire State Building, 12 inches tall is stealing. The Empire State Building is if I download it illegally. And this has happened. This lady, Jamie Thomas, was fined $1.9 million because she shared 24 songs online. Just yesterday, the Tenenbaum case, a guy shared 30 songs, was fined over $600,000. So there have been some cases where these things have hit. Let me talk about fair use because this is really important within the classroom. Fair use is your ability to use something without the written permission of the copyright holder. And you can see one of those things is for teaching. But it's important to understand fair use is not a right, it's a defense. So you can't say to the copyright holder, oh, I'm using that as a fair use. If someone sues you for using their work, they take you to court, and then you plead with the judge, I used it under fair use, and the judge will consider 4 different factors to determine if your use really was fair. The first one is how transformative was your work? In other words, I show a picture of a butterfly because a butterfly is transformed from a moth. If I photocopy a page, I have not transformed it. I photocopied a page. But if I take a song and I play it in a class where we're talking about an era of music, or I take a sound bite and I play it so that people can understand the contextual meaning behind a speech given in history, I've transformed it to something different. I'm not just making a copy and giving it to my students. The second factor is exactly what kind of thing am I copying. Here's 2 examples. Since it's baseball season right now, let's suppose I have every score of every game that's ever been played. These are facts. Facts are not protected by copyright. But if I have a creative work like a story, Casey at the Bat, 100% protected by copyright. So my little chart that shows math facts, those are facts, and I cannot copyright those. But if it's something very creative, a song, a story, a poem, a photograph, then it's completely protected by copyright. The third factor is how much I've copied. And there is no law that says 10 seconds of a 1-minute song or anything like that. The general rule is the less you use, the more likely it's covered by fair use. And the last and the most important thing is, how does it affect the person that owns the copyright? If I take a textbook and I copy it so that I can use it in my class without buying more textbooks, I'm destroying the ability of the textbook creator to sell textbooks. So the judge is going to say, you're killing their market, that's not fair use. So those 4 factors are going to be looked at by the judge. Now, there is something called the Teach Act from 2001 that says if you have a closed system like Blackboard where students are required to log on, you can take something used in the class, make a copy of it, and put it into that system. Because it's a closed system, it's legal. So you can, and that's one that almost everybody says, oh no, you can't do that. Now, let me wrap up a little bit by talking about Creative Commons. I talk a lot in my classes about how you can get things that have very limited copyright on them. And if you go to their site, you can see they have millions of audio, pictures, video, even text. You can see here, here's 12 million texts, stories, poems, those sorts of things. Now you can use their search tool. It's called Creative Commons, some rights reserved, and all of the licenses have what's called attribution. I can use it simply by giving the owner of the work credit for creating the work. Now there are some other things, like not for making money. Share alike means if I use their content, I have to make my work Creative Commons license. And then there's no derivatives. Like if I write a song, you can't remix my song if it's licensed, no derivatives. You can use it as background in your presentation, you just can't remix it. And then there's all sorts of combinations of these. I use this very last one, which is the non-commercial share alike. If you go to Flickr and go to the Creative Commons page on Flickr, you can see that there are 11 million, 4 million, 30 million, 13 million, 27 million, 8 million, millions and millions of photos licensed Creative Commons. If I add all of these together, you can see when I did this little screenshot, which was in February, so it's been 6 months, there are 95 million different photographs that I can use for free without getting written permission of the person that owns them. And to give you an idea, I did the same thing a year earlier, and there were only 58 million. So I'm sure at this point there's probably close to 150 million pictures that are in this one resource of Creative Commons. And if you can't find something and you violate copyright law, then you should go right to jail, because there's so much out there, including this picture I found on Flickr and Creative Commons. When I go to look for pictures, I use Comp Fight. It's very handy because I can tell it to only find Creative Commons pictures, and then I can type in something like classroom, and it will show me 100 pictures at a time, where Flickr will only show me, I don't know, maybe 20. So it's much handier to search through a whole lot of pictures to find what I'm looking for. I typed in classroom, and I found all of these different pictures, some of them old, some of them not so old, that dealt with the classroom. And if I wanted to use any one of these pictures in any way, I can go to the site, make a copy of the picture, and you'll see this says some rights reserved. I can't use this commercially. I copy where I got the picture. This is my attribution. Remember, I have to give attribution. And then somewhere in my presentation, I give you a link where I got this particular picture. I've completely fulfilled my obligation to Creative Commons by giving attribution. I can use this picture without any written permission from the copyright holder. Now, if I don't want to put words on the photo, I can put them at the end, like credits at the end of a movie. I find that it doesn't distract from the content as much if I do it that way. So that's typically what I do. Also, there's a huge store of public domain information. Anything created by the U.S. government is automatically, from the time of creation, in the public domain. So I can use that. Also, anything before 1923 is also in the public domain. So I can find old pictures and I can use those without contacting the owner of the copyright. So when I start to use my pictures, it's important to understand what's called the rule of thirds. That is, if I take the picture, divide it into 3 columns and 3 rows, a person's eye is drawn to the intersections of those lines. So if I have a picture, people are going to probably notice what intersects at those lines. Keep that in mind when you're taking a picture as well. Some of the most famous pictures ever made have very interesting things right at those intersections. If you watch television, you'll notice that the people in the picture aren't in the center, they're at one of those intersections. So it's a good idea whenever you're putting a picture on there that you keep this in mind. Last thing, one of the books that I read is Why Most PowerPoint Presentations Suck by Rick Altman. And he has a quote right in I think the first few pages of the book that is what he's heard so many people say about PowerPoint, and that is it's so easy that I learned it in 15 minutes. And the problem is if you go with the 15 minutes, your PowerPoints are going to look bad. So my challenge to you is to take a little more than 15 minutes to learn how to do PowerPoint. If you need a picture of a clock that has 15 minutes on it, take a picture. This is a picture of my clock sitting in my office on the corner of my desk. I set the books down that I talked about, and I took a picture of those. So you can take pictures of a lot of things. I recommend that you put down a piece of white paper and sit your object on there and put your camera on a tripod whenever you take a picture. Now, this is a studio picture. I did this, I know because I took this picture. Notice though, I moved the object way off to the left so that I have a lot of room to write my text on there. And I also have a lot of contrast. So this is another picture I took in my studio of words on that black screen of my computer. Now, this studio isn't very complicated. I went to Staples and I bought a $5 roll of white paper, and I just stretched it out on the floor and took pictures. So I have what looks like an infinite white background. Very simple technique. Cost me all of $5, and I had to lay down on the floor to take a picture. So I end up taking a lot of pictures that I use in my own presentations, but the ones that I use that are Creative Commons, I have to give attribution for those. Now, to show you how powerful pictures can be, I'm going to do the little attribution thing here, and as you see these pictures, see if you can recall what I talked about when I showed you each one of these pictures. So that's everything in my presentation. Once again, if you want to look at some of my resources, they're listed here. And I had told Lorna that I'd stick around afterwards, and if anybody had any questions or anything,
Alvin,
I'd be happy
a phenomenal
to go over them.
presentation. I know people have had millions of questions going on in the chat room. Some have been answered and some have not, and the resources you've given everybody should help some of those questions. People need to do some homework after this presentation, so there's a lot to absorb today. I really want to thank you for your presentation, and I need to let Kim take over the microphone for a minute and finish up with the review. if you could, Kim, and I know we have a poll question about what our site's going on with, but as Alvin has said, he's going to hang around for a few minutes, so if you want to be patient, we'll let him answer some of your questions. Thank you, Alvin.
Yes, definitely. Thank you, Alvin. That was fantastic. We're going to go ahead and close up the show, and if you want to stick around and ask a few questions, you're welcome to do so. If you need to leave, we understand that, and we thank you for coming today. Next week, on August the 8th, we're going to have the founders of the Exploring, All About Explorers website, and we're going to be talking about how you can use that website in your classroom. And if you haven't explored that website, allaboutexplorers.com is the website. I encourage you to do so before next week. You'll find some very interesting things, and I'll just leave that little teaser for you to check it out and see. And also next Wednesday, August 7th, our beginner series, it should be the 5th, I think. I put the wrong date. The 5th, next Wednesday, we're going to be starting the beginner center series back up with Sue Waters on RSS feeds, and starting that with what it is, how you use RSS feeds, and all kinds of information that's going to be really helpful and interesting. So be sure that you join us on Wednesday, August the 5th. And Steve Hargadon has started a number of communities and networks and sites, and among them Classroom 2.0. And Tuesday, August 4th, he will be having an interview session at 11 a.m. Pacific and 2 p.m. Eastern Time on social networking and education with Dave Tosh from ELG. ELG is a similar kind of a mean community, and that will be great. Another great interview session with a kind of different perspective on creating a community site. And be sure to join our Classroom 2.0 Live Diigo group in the Diigo bookmarking site. And if you haven't joined that site already, I encourage you to do so. You can bookmark to Diigo, and that also feeds into Delicious Bookmarks. So if you haven't done that, please do so that you can communicate and bookmark resources with us, as well as receive the share tabs and the resources with us. We were using the GLAM resource for the list of links, but something has happened with the GLAM website. Even though you still have the glamorous Classroom 2.0 Live show hosts, we're back to the share tabs. So we're going to stick with that, I think, for the time being, and try and convert those over, because something has happened to the GLAM website. So I posted the share tabs link in here in the chat. We're going to also post it on the slides in just a bit. So I'm going to pass over the mic to Peggy for a bit to talk about a poll question for just a second, and then we're going to pass it back to Alvin.
Hi, I'm going to make this real quick, but we would love to have some input from all of you about our website. We've been posting our archives and our follow-up resources in 2 separate blogs, and you can see those pages on the screen. The left is the archives, and the right is a list of all of the links that you can check out after the show. Our question that we'd like you to vote on is whether you would like those combined into one link with an RSS feed so you can access them all in one click, or whether you would like us to keep them in 2 separate blog posts, archives in one and the resources in another. So if you could just take a minute and click on A if you would like them to remain as they are in 2 separate blog posts, a B if you would like us to combine them into a single blog post, which is a little bit long but contains all of the information about one show, or a C if you really don't care and don't have a preference. And I see the votes are coming in, and Kim will post the results as soon as we finish posting. There are definitely pros and cons to each of those approaches, and we would love to know what you think.
And Peggy, it looks like so far about 13% have said that they'd like to keep it in 2 separate posts. 38% has said a single post, and 12% don't have a preference.
Thank you, everyone, for your feedback. That is very helpful. And we'll be talking this over, but it looks like the majority prefer to have it in a single blog post. So you may see some changes coming. Thanks, everyone.
Great. Thank you for voting and taking time. We appreciate the feedback, and we'll try to make that short and simple. And I'm going to go ahead and post our survey link, and we hope that you will take a few minutes to answer the survey. It gives Illuminate some information, but more importantly, it gives us information and feedback about the show, and lets us know what is important to you and the information that you would like, as well as information about our website that is helpful to you in the future. So if you could please fill out the survey, click on the link now. We'll also try and post it with the resources so that you can fill it out later. We really appreciate the feedback that you give us through the surveys. We look at those and we take that into account, just like the poll and combining the blog posts. We want to make it useful for you so that you have the information and that you have access to it that's quick and easy, not something that's going to be tedious or time-consuming to follow through with. So if you could fill that out, that would be great. And I have the Share Tabs link, and that's also posted in the chat. And we want to give a special thanks to Alvin today for joining us, and Steve Hargadon, who's our founder of Classroom 2.0 and Future of Education, as well as the Conversations.net, the new NEAN conversation site that Steve started. And everybody, thank you so much for participating in the show today and joining us. And we appreciate, we're sorry that we ran over a little bit longer, but we thank you for joining and staying with us today. So now I'm going to pass the mic back to Alvin, and if you have questions that you'd like to ask Alvin, you can type your questions into the chat, or you can raise your hand and we'll give you the mic. And Herb, you have the mic, and you can go ahead and ask your question or share a comment to Alvin, with Alvin.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we sure can.
Okay, great. On the textbook and the NFL example, I think in both cases, licensure can trump copyright. For instance, the textbook publisher, if they gave you a copy with the stipulation that you not resell it, then reselling it would violate that license, and although it wouldn't violate copyright, but it would violate that license. And with the NFL broadcast, they have a license with the cable provider that frequently, that's why they got into the whole issue with the whole NFL and cable channels. I know here in Texas, several of Dallas Cowboys games weren't shown because they were on the NFL network and not on the public network, and that created a huge issue. But licensure, people need to be careful about licensure versus copyright, because licensure can also get you into court as well if you violate a license agreement that you have with someone.
Those are both correct. The thing is, I've never been given a textbook by a textbook manufacturer where I had to sign a license agreement. They just stamp on there, not for resale, hoping you won't resell it. So as far as the textbooks, but if you do sign a licensure agreement, you're correct about that. The whole deal on the thing on TV, though, if you look at the first version of my presentation, I went into the whole story with the professor who actually copied that and put it onto YouTube. And that also was not a licensure case. It was a copyright. It was a fair use case. It was never taken to court because the NFL knew they couldn't win, because she was talking about fair use principles in a classroom, and she posted a video online. It's still on YouTube. If you go to YouTube and search for NFL copyright, actually I have the link in my delicious links. You can watch the whole thing. It's online. In fact, it was the Super Bowl that the Indianapolis Colts won, so it's really old. It's been on there for 3 or 4 years. But you're right about the license. They're separate issues, just like trademark issues and patent issues are separate items too. So copyright deals with just creative works being copied, which I tried to point out right at the beginning. I saw someone post a question, what kind of camera do I use? I have a whole slew of cameras. I have a camera I carry in my pocket all the time. It's just a Canon point and shoot. It's an SD 1100. My kids have SD 1000s. 4 or 5 years ago, I bought an SLR. I bought a Canon XT, and then after I was comfortable with it, I upgraded to I have a 40D now. So if I'm doing serious photography, I use an SLR. Otherwise, most of my pictures I'm finding that I take with a point and shoot because I have it in my pocket literally all the time.
Great, thank you, Ever. I appreciate that. Does anybody else have a question that they would like to ask? You can type it in the chat, or we can give you the mic and you can ask Alvin your question about copyright or the presentation.
Something that I don't mention in the presentation, I didn't mention it in this presentation, is I talked to the most prominent law firm in Ohio representing schools to find out if a teacher has ever been prosecuted in Ohio for using copyrighted materials in a presentation in a classroom. So not putting it online, not giving copies to students, just standing up in front of the class and presenting. And there has never been a case where a teacher has even been given a warning that they are violating copyright law ever in Ohio. And the law firm said it'll never happen because first off, the owner of the material doesn't want to look bad in the public eye as not going along with educational practices, and the public doesn't understand fair use very well. So he said there will probably never be a law case because schools just don't have the money to pursue it either.
Definitely. That the attorney fees are a big issue, and the public image with the money being cut already are another concern. Carmen, do you have a question that you'd like to ask of Alvin or make a comment?
Yes, thank you very much. Can you hear me okay?
We sure can.
Okay. If there is a textbook that I have that is no longer in print, and I want to use it with students in an online classroom, what might I be able to do with regard to allowing the students to have access to that book?
Well, if the book is older than 1923, you can do whatever you want because it's in the public domain. You can photocopy it. You could do it anything you want. But if it's printed or if it's copyrighted after 1923, the same law applies. If you read the story behind Creative Commons, it's this problem that was the basis for Lawrence Lessig to start Creative Commons, because most books go out of copy within 10 or 15 years. So you can't get copies of these older books. So imagine a book that's 50 years old, still fully protected by copyright, but you can't buy a copy of it anywhere. So Creative Commons was created to give people an avenue to put things out there so that people could make copies without the fear of being sued in copyright court. Now, the thing is, if it's out of print, you could see if you could find the owner of the copyright and get permission. But on the flip side, if you were to copy that book, the owner of the copyright would have to be the person to find you and prosecute you. So usually in the classroom, it swings towards the educator if the educator's done everything possible that can be done. So if you try to contact the person that owns the copyright, and you can't find, and you don't hear from, you write them a letter and you don't hear from them. If it's something that's out of print, and maybe the author has been dead for a number of years, unfortunately, copyright law says that it's in copyright for 70 years after the author's death. So it's going to be a long time before it's in the public domain. But it's really fully protected by copyright law, and you can thank people like Sonny Bono for that, extending. And we're in the middle of a 20-year span where nothing will go into the public domain. In 1998, the Sonny Bono copyright extension law added 20 years to everything. So in the last 10 years, we have had not one single document that was copyrighted expire into the public domain.
Somebody asked if it's 1923 or 1929 now.
It's 1920. Did I say 1929? I'm sorry. It's 1923. It's the Sonny Bono Copyright Extension Law is commonly called the Mickey Mouse Copyright Extension Act because 1923 was when Mickey Mouse was created. So he was getting ready to go into the public domain, and magically copyright was extended for 20 years to prevent Mickey Mouse from going into the public domain. Or otherwise, anybody could sell anything that had Mickey Mouse on it because his copyright would have expired.
Oh, my goodness.
So somebody asked about getting paid to be a presenter. If you can use materials, you have permission. If you're giving a single presentation, and that presentation is not recorded, you have a lot more latitude than if you record the presentation, because recording is making a copy. So you could go, even if you were, say a school paid you to come and talk about a topic, and you use pictures that were copyrighted, as long as no one photographs it or records it in any way, fair use will be much more likely to protect you because you aren't damaging someone's ability to sell something if you just show it one time. In fact, there's the whole copyright of that Obama photograph. The artist countersued the photographer and said, hey, my artwork made your picture famous. Without my artwork, your picture is nothing. So, it's completely up to the copyright holder on who gets to use it for what. But if you use it one time in an environment not copied in any way, you're pretty safe. Now, you're not completely safe. You're pretty safe.
I know this still gets to, there's no definitive black, white, straight answer.
No, there isn't. Someone asked if it violates copyright if a teacher shows a movie. It has to be either a movie approved for public display, and you can get movies that have a special license so that they can be shown to a public audience. But if it doesn't, you're actually violating copyright if you're showing a class one of those movies that's intended for the private viewing in your home. It's not a public display version. But it goes back to what I said. The copyright owners don't typically come after schools that are showing a movie the last day before Christmas vacation, because what would be the point?
I think Disney has too, some schools in Texas.
They have?
Yeah.
And they didn't make copies, they just showed the movies.
Right.
Yeah.
They, or the studio's content or something. I'm not for certain, but I do believe that Disney has contacted the studios, the studios or Disney contacted the district or the schools.
The only time I have seen something happen like that is when, say, a student makes something and it ends up on the school website, and then it's found out that the background music of a student video, let's say, the background music is a copyrighted piece of music. They just, picked a top 40 song they liked.
Right.
And a lot of schools I have seen, they have been given takedown notices. and all you have to do is
Right.
just take it offline.
Right. Right.
But I've never heard of anything happening for if something just happens in the class. First off, how does Disney know that a teacher showed a movie in class? I mean, it's almost impossible unless some kid goes home and says, "Dad, we watched Little Mermaid in class," and the dad works for Disney. There's almost no way to even know that.
I don't know that it was a class or if it was like a school event, like a whole campus, and maybe they were selling tickets like a PTA thing or something. It wasn't just an isolated little one class teacher thing. But still,
Yeah, the big thing is Peggy posted. You can't show them for entertainment.
Exactly.
It has to be connected to
your content. Yeah.
Yeah, and I also saw somebody say, "There go my comparing visual text and print." You know, it goes back to transforming. If you're using photos that are used to teach a lesson of some sort, you're much more likely to be covered in fair use. You're not copying them for the sake of copying them. You're changing the context of the photo to talk about art or something else.
I know I've been guilty of using like almost an entire song in a video at the end of the year with students. Thanks, Carmen, for your question. Does anybody else have a question that they would like to ask? If so, you can post your question in the chat, or we can give you the mic and you can ask Alvin your question.
If you, in my delicious links, just search through those for Disney, and someone put together a Disney fair use, and they took 1-second snippets of all these Disney movies that you have seen. They're all cartoons, and together they give the message of fair use. And so one character, the Little Mermaid says one thing, and then one of the other characters says another, and they go through the whole, from all different movies, Snow White and you name it, it's probably in there. And it's quite entertaining, and it's been online for years, and there's nothing Disney can do about it. So someone has a question about taking a screenshot. That's a good question. Again, it really depends. Technically, when you do a screenshot, you're creating a new work. You're going to a page or framing it, and so you are transforming it. But I have heard of cases where people have captured a screen that has a picture. Usually it's a trademark thing. They have like a logo or something, and the company says, "Hey, you have a presentation that's online." Again, you really only run into problems if you put it out there publicly available, and Microsoft comes along and they see you have the Microsoft logo, or Apple says you have the Apple logo, and they say take that out. If you watch my video, the 2.0 version or the 1.0 version is on TeacherTube, I have a whole Seinfeld clip in my video because I transformed it. I took a clip where they're videotaping in a movie, and I used that to talk about piracy. So I only showed 15-20 seconds of it, but it's clearly a Seinfeld, and I have never ever been given a takedown notice for that, and neither has TeacherTube. And it's been watched 40,000 times or something, which it's not a million like the JK wedding dance, but still, for an hour-long presentation, it's been watched quite a few times.
The JK wedding dance is funny, though. Are there any other questions before we let Alvin go about copyright, presenting, the screencast tutorials on using different software programs? Is that what you mean, media flow? Okay.
Yes, no, there's nothing wrong with that. If you at the university, we subscribe to what's the Atomic Learning? Yeah, and all of those are screencasts. Now, there's a very interesting case. I don't know if anyone has heard of Wolfram Alpha, but it's a new. It's not really a search engine, it's a data engine that puts together pieces of information based on how you've searched. Well, it was pointed out right away that Wolfram Alpha has a copyright clause that says if you anything that shows data from them, in other words, any search you do, it's copyrighted by them. So this is like saying if you use PowerPoint to make a presentation, it's copyrighted by Microsoft. Or if you use Word to do a presentation or to create a document, it's because you've used Word to create it. So Wolfram Alpha never imagined how people would use this tool to create content, but they're saying that they own all the content that is created. It hasn't been challenged in court. And if they were to win, if Wolfram Alpha was to win this, I think it would change a lot of things because you wouldn't be able to use anything to create content without the owner of the tool having some say-so in what happens to the copyright.
Well, I'm guilty of not really reading the terms of service that well, and I know there was a big issue on Facebook a while back, and people were really upset that the things that they posted on Facebook were becoming the property rights, per se, of Facebook, and then they changed their terms of service.
Yeah, nowadays there are so many people that understand copyright enough that they're watching all of these terms of service. Google's been caught on this several times, Facebook, like you just said, and so far everybody's gone back to their old terms of service as far as copyright's concerned.
Yeah, definitely people are paying closer attention instead of just clicking I accept blindly. Reading that fine print, as Peggy mentioned, and really reading those licensing agreements and seeing what you're agreeing to and what you're giving up is really crucial nowadays. And copyright is just so complicated sometimes. Are there any other questions? Looks like we've kind of wound down with our questions of Alvin. I'm sure if you have other questions that come up, you can email Alvin or check out those YouTube videos that he's mentioned. And we've had past shows on Creative Commons, and even though I've done some research on it, it still gets confusing in the gray area and the fair use, and depending upon how you're using these resources. So it's so great, Alvin, to have you come on and help clarify some of these concerns and issues so that we definitely do not break the law, at least not knowingly. So thank you so much, Alvin, for joining us today, and join us next week, everybody, at the same time on August the 8th for exploring the allaboutexplorers.com website. It's going to be another great session. I think you'll find, once you check out that website, some very interesting things. Some interesting things that Christopher Columbus has done when he landed on America. So I'll just leave you with that teaser. And thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Have a great afternoon, a great evening, or a great night, depending upon where you are in the world. And thanks again, Alvin and Lorna and Peggy. Welcome back. Take care, everybody.
Thank you guys for having me. I enjoyed it. I hope you did pick up especially some presentation tips. So go out there and make great presentations. That's all I ask.
Definitely, definitely. And we'll get rid of our bullets on our slides. So have a great day, everybody. Thank you so much. See you next week.
Thanks, Kim. Do I need to be the last one to let everybody out before I can stop the recording, or can you stop the recording? I don't know this part.
when everybody leaves, the recording will stop itself.
Okay, so I don't have to worry about that part.
Correct.
Just no, it's the same thing as last week. You just right-click if they haven't left. I see a few people did the away.
Correct. Correct.
Right.
Lorna, thanks again for having me on. And if you ever want to talk about presenting or copyright in the future, just let me know.
Thanks, Alvin. It was a pleasure to hear you. And you know, I watched the presentation, but you know that dynamic, you say ear to ear, can be face to face. It really, you know, helps clarify things that you're asking when you're watching it. You know, I'm still looking for you to give us that dimension to capturing the image. So I guess some of that, does that come from the books that you were mentioning to us? It was just innate.
You know, I should have said this before, but one thing I do, just because for the last few years I've focused so much on presenting, is I just watch all the time for something that might help in any presentation. And whenever I literally carry a camera with me all the time, a little point and shoot that fits in my pocket, and whenever I see something that I think I can use in a presentation, I just take a picture of it. So most days I take, 20 or 30 pictures. It doesn't sound like a lot, but when you do that every day, and then you have days where you take 100, and I just keep them sorted. I tag all of them so I can find them later. And whenever I run across an instance where I think, gosh, I need a picture of a fire truck, or I need a picture of, a little kid sitting in the grass, I just have tons of pictures like that.
Great idea. Yeah, thank you very much. Enjoy your
You're
vacation.
Welcome. Thanks. I think I'm going to head out now.
Thanks.